Hello and welcome to this edition of the Golf Channel podcast with Rex and Lav. In this week's episode, we're talking the duel at Harbortown. Matt Fitzpatrick going head-to-head with Jordan Spieth. Jon Rahm honors his commitment while Rory McIlroy backs out of a second mandatory event on the PGA Tour. We'll also talk slow play, as that is all the buzz right now. Rex, isn't that great? We're talking about slow play once again. We're not talking about the Saudis. We're not talking about LIV. We're not talking about existential threats. We're not talking about world ranking points. We're back talking about slow play. Isn't that wonderful?
Isn't that cute? Isn't that funny? Like, remember back in the day when that was the edgiest thing we could possibly talk about? And let me say this about slow play. And one more thing. I love how everyone, and really this is, I don't want to get in, like, defending Patrick Cantlay is not, like, I don't want that lane at all. However, I was kind of amazed that he sort of became the lightning rod in all this, because anyone who watches tour golf will tell you that they're all slow. And like, all right, maybe Pat's a little bit slower than the next guy, but there's no reason, there's no motivation for him to be fast. And I wrote about this on Friday because we've argued about it. We'll talk about it again. It's sort of just cute that this is where we've landed and it feels good. And oh, we're actually talking about golf. The part that gets me is I'm a baseball guy. You're a baseball guy. And they have trimmed 25 minutes.
Used to be.
25 minutes. Yeah. They have trimmed 25 minutes, almost a half an hour off of these games because of what they've done, the rules that they've implemented this year. I don't know if you watched any baseball this year, but it's awesome because it doesn't take you all night long to sit there. I would actually vote for if they started them a little bit early, like everyone would want to watch baseball because it's so much more refreshing. And I was taken by the idea when I was writing about this on Friday that if the tour was really serious about this, like baseball got really serious about this, they could do something about it instead of we're all just going to throw our hands in the air, point at Patrick Cantlay because he's the bad guy here. He's the slow one. He's the one causing him all the problems, and then just move on because you can't do anything about it.
So you want to see a shot clock in golf. That's what you want to see.
I'm not against it. I mean, I don't know about you.
They tried it on the European tour.
Yeah, they did. And I didn't think it was a bad idea. I didn't think it was gimmicky or anything. I kind of liked it. Look, if you really want to do something about slow play, then do something about slow play. Quit just throwing your head in the sand, saying that, oh, we've got 156 players on a golf course. We're never going to get them around fast enough. That's fine. That's always been the excuse. However, moving forward at almost all of your big events now, you've got a limited field. You're going to have between 70 and 80 players because of their designated events now. Find a way to play fast.
I mean, I don't think they have trouble when it's 70-man fields and it's twosomes.
I disagree.
They're flying around there.
Oh, I disagree because this goes back to Augusta on Sunday. I mean, this is when it all started. This is when everyone was watching Patrick Cantlay walk slowly and do whatever.
So it's actually funny. So I was out on the golf course. I was out on the entire second 9 at Augusta National. And so obviously I don't have my phone. I'm not looking at social media. I had no idea about the furor over Patrick Cantlay's pace of play. Now, when I was out there, I was like, "Ooh, this does seem like slow. Like it doesn't seem like we're moving at all." I never would have thought like, "Oh, it's all because of Patrick Cantlay and the group ahead, basically pace setting." Majors are tough for me because like there's so much on the line, and I know it's unfair to your fellow playing competitors if you're taking too long to kind of decide on a shot or to play your shot. Like I totally get that. But like if you're standing on the 12th tee at Augusta, like I'm okay with them taking a minute and a half to try and dial in their yardage or try and get the right club or kind of gauge the wind. Like I don't want them sitting there for 3 minutes, but having a sort of quote unquote shot clock also kind of takes away some of the drama, doesn't it? Like some of the indecision, some of the precise decision making you have to make on a penal golf course like that, I think is also sort of the appeal, is it not?
I think so. And again, I'm not going to be the one that sits here and argues that, oh, something has to be done. However, I've heard that argument as well. And I don't know that I disagree with you, but you're not going to have two separate sets of rules. So you're going to find a way. If we want to be serious about picking up the pace of play and everyone wants to complain about it, no one wants to be serious about it, it would have to be some sort of blanket policy. I mean, it would apply to the majors and to PGA Tour events, but it's not going to happen because the tour, again, has no motivation to change things around just because of the way TV can sort of cut up these rounds now, and you don't see Patrick Cantlay more times than not.
That's why I don't understand why are TV viewers so upset about this? Because now if Patrick Cantlay's over the ball and he's shuffling his feet and he's looking at the target 6, 7, 8 times, like, yeah, I get that. That's not a thing. that's not a good watch. However, if Patrick Cantlay's still indecisive, they can go cut ahead to Jon Rahm making a charge. They can go look at Scotty Scheffler and then come back when Patrick Cantlay is actually hitting the ball. Like, I don't understand why TV viewers are getting upset. I can understand from an in-person experience, it's a tough watch, but why the big deal on TV?
Again, I think it's the Masters. I think probably with the way every shot can be seen now, like, I don't think there's a place for the slower players to hide anymore. Whereas before, I think the networks, Golf Channel, we could work around the slower players and fill in the gaps. And you wouldn't see Patrick Cantlay or Kevin Na, pick whatever name you want to be the poster child for this. You don't have that anymore. If you really want to watch and see how slow Patrick Cantlay is, you can watch him hit every painstakingly slow shot if that's what you want to see. Again, I don't think there's any motivation, because what we could possibly end up with, and look, maybe baseball ends up in this exact same scenario where you get a called out in the ninth inning of Game 7 of the World Series. Like, no one wants that because of the new rules. Like, then all of a sudden you would have a bunch of people that are up in the air. No one wants to see Patrick Cantlay get a slow play penalty coming down the stretch on the second 9 in Augusta, because everyone's going to scream about it. Like, oh no, we can't do that. Like, you have to give them extra time, as you just argued, on Sunday at a major championship. Well, if you're going to do that, then you're never going to create a policy that works.
I understand that. And we also have no way to know how Patrick Cantlay ranks among his peers in terms of slow play. Is he actually?
We do.
Well, it's not. Yeah. It's not made public. Like, we have data for how these players stack up from hitting approach shots from the left rough from 225 to 250 yards, but we don't actually know who the slowest players on the PGA Tour are. Like, is Patrick Cantlay slow? Is he middle of the pack? Is he actually among the fastest? There is information. There's ShotLink data that is available to the tour, to the players if they ask. However, that is not made public. And so I would, once again, as with most things PGA Tour related, lobby for more openness, more transparency. Public shaming, I have always said, is a great deterrent. And so publishing that list, making known who the dawdlers are, I actually think could be a bit of a benefit. The thing that really annoys me, which I think was in stark contrast, and again, I was watching from television as you were and not in-person experience. What Patrick Cantlay doesn't do well is he's not prepared to hit the shot immediately. That's one thing that Matt Fitzpatrick does exceedingly well. I think he's a very fast player. As it is, he does everything quickly in his life. But Matt Fitzpatrick is ready to go as soon as Cantlay or Spieth hit a shot. Like, he's already crunched the numbers. He's already picked a club. He's already going through his visualization process. And so whenever they make contact and the ball lands on the green and everyone cheers, like, Matt Fitzpatrick is just about to pull the trigger. DJ does that. Brooks does that. All of the great players do that. That is kind of the area where I think the slow players, Patrick Cantlay in particular, it shouldn't be to the point where, okay, he just hit, now it's time for me to start my process. That process should already be starting whenever your fellow playing competitors are playing. Like, that's just kind of like a courtesy and an easy way to speed this whole thing up.
Oh, if you and I are playing golf, that's the way we're going to do it. My guess is 99% of the public who's going to listen to this podcast, that's the way they do it. I don't sit and watch you play your shot and decide what I'm going to do with mine. Like, there's no benefit for me to do that. So I think most people do exactly what you're talking about. I would counter, and again, I don't want to become the defender of Patrick Cantlay in this situation, because he is slow, but I think there's a lot of slow players. And the argument that I made is, this isn't a Patrick Cantlay problem. This is a PGA Tour problem.
He's just on TV a lot because he's really good at golf. He's one of the best players in the world, and he's been in contention. So it's becoming more apparent to TV viewers just how methodical he is.
Well, and there's no motivation for him to speed up. Like, I don't know how many fast players I've spoken to. Probably, years ago, Lucas Glover was probably the first one that told me, like, he was one of the fastest players when he was in college. And that was literally stomped out of him within a year on the PGA Tour, because you can't play fast if you're surrounded by people who are playing at their own pace, which is the PGA Tour pace, which is 5-hour plus rounds. You're just going to drive yourself crazy if you're the only fast one in the group, because you're going to spend all day long constantly waiting. And no one wants to do that either. So in the weird extreme way that the PGA Tour slows these people down, now Lucas Glover is a slow player. And it's simply because everybody on the PGA Tour is slow. And without something dramatic like they've done in baseball, I don't see that changing.
And until the PGA Tour routinely misses their 6 o'clock cutoff window for the broadcast,
And they won't.
I think it's. I mean, we've been talking about this. We talked about this before Liv came along. We will talk about this obviously after Liv comes along. This has been an issue for as long as professional golf has been played. There are no answers yet. I do think, however, transparency with the timing system is one small step that could actually go
It would help
a long way. Okay, so Patrick Cantlay did not win the tournament, despite us talking about him for 11 minutes at the top of this podcast. The winner was Matt Fitzpatrick, his second PGA Tour title, first since last year's U.S. Open. Obviously, validation in some sense. Jordan Spieth once again had another great opportunity to win a tournament, just as he has had great opportunities over the past 2 months or so. What was your big takeaway from Sunday at Harbortown, and what I thought was actually one of the most entertaining final round duels that we've seen on the PGA Tour this season?
It was, and I mean, this is kind of a two-part conversation, because I was kind of taken by the idea that the designated events continue to work, right? I mean, we can sit here and Rory not being in the field is certainly going to be a conversation that we're going to have. But you ended up with these two players going head-to-head on what, by most accounts, is one of the most favored golf courses on the PGA Tour. And it kind of fit those two perfectly, where you have two shot makers, you have two players with creative short games, you have two guys that when they get hot with the putter, they can do something very, very special. That I think it's kind of cool that it came down to these two. And specifically for Matt, I'm still, and this goes back to last year's US Open and sort of digging into the stats and seeing how he transformed himself in a way that I think you could sit here and say, okay, Bryson tried to do it in a much different way. Whereas Matt didn't pack on 50 pounds and become this big gorilla. He decided that, okay, I need to change my game another way. I need to do it more effectively. I need to be smarter about it. And I think what he's doing is sort of setting the standard, because you and I both know so many players on the PGA Tour that'll just kind of, again, throw their arms up in the air because, oh, I don't hit it far enough. I'm never going to be able to compete out here. You can make an argument that Matt did not hit it far enough to be a consistent winner on the PGA Tour. And he has transformed himself in this amazing way. And he's done it in a very sustainable way. And he's done it in a way that he avoids injury. I think it's an amazing sort of metamorphosis.
He's such a refreshing player to watch. And he's probably never going to be like a fan favorite. But for those of us who cover him, talk to him, like I love picking his brain. And he just gives 0 Fs in terms of like how he approaches the game. Like, okay, I need to get longer. This is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to do speed training. I don't care what it looks like. I don't care kind of what some of the pratfalls are. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it and working with my neuro physicists and all these other team members in order to maximize his game. And now he's a top 25 driver on the PGA Tour for a guy who's 5'8", 5'9", in a very slight build. It's incredibly impressive to see what he's done there. He doesn't matter if he's putting with the flagstick in. It doesn't matter if he's chipping cross-handed. Like, he does everything a little bit differently, but it works for him, and he's incredibly comfortable in his own skin, which is why I think he's such a refreshing player to watch. This now moves him up to number 8 in the world career best mark for Matt Fitzpatrick. Once again, it would not surprise me at all if he is a factor in the remaining 3 major championships. He has a very well-rounded game coming off a top 10 at Augusta National. Like, you have to put him on the short list of favorites for the tournaments like the U.S. Open and the Open Championship. The way he can fly his golf ball, shape shots. Like, I think he's a lot of fun to watch, and he's a very well-rounded player. What was your take, Rex, on Jordan Spieth? Another great final round. Just doesn't walk away with a W. This would have been, in my opinion, his most significant title since the Open Championship back in 2017. Designated field, playing some great golf right now. But once again, unable to get it done, just like he couldn't get it done at Bay Hill, Valspar. Masters had a chance, I guess, an outside chance, something spectacular coming out on the second 9. What was your takeaway?
Encouraging. I mean, you could break it down. You could say, though, this was an opportunity that he let slip through his fingers, as you just went on for 3 minutes about. I mean, Matt Fitzpatrick is a really, really good player. He's a world-class player. He's in the top 10. He'll probably stay in the top 10 for the foreseeable future. In Jordan's case, and I don't know if he looks at it this way because he seems to be his own worst critic sometimes, I gave myself an opportunity. And if you kind of look what he did coming down the stretch on Sunday, there were probably some iron shots that he'd rather do over, but everything else, I felt like he executed pretty well, and you just got beat. And I don't know, if you're a world-class player, how difficult that is to get over, because you're going to try every single shot. You're going to try every single week. But in this particular case, you just got beat by a better player. I don't know that it's anything he did on Sunday at Harbor Town leads me to worry about where he's going to be in the future. Were there, again, he didn't really give himself a birdie look over the last 3 or 4 holes is the one thing I noticed. But outside of that, I felt like he played solid enough to be confident going into the next few weeks on the PGA Tour.
Yeah, I actually think this was probably his most complete tournament that he's had this season. 68 or better in all 4 rounds, pair of 66s on the weekend on what is a very tricky golf course. Like you absolutely have to strike your golf ball well. And Jordan Spieth was doing that. You look at the birdie opportunities that he gave himself on the first 2 playoff holes. I mean, a great look that somehow finished behind the hole in the first playoff hole, and then another one straight up the gut on 17 that just lacked a little bit of speed and dove right at the end. With a little bit more speed, probably both of those putts are dropping, and it's an entirely different story. And he's the 4th player to defend his title at the RBC Heritage. It was interesting that last year, I think he was kind of gifted that one, right? Like he played great on Sunday. He watched, it seemed like a half dozen players falter around him, got into the playoff with Patrick Cantlay, and then won on the first playoff hole. This year, I actually think he played better and didn't win, which is just kind of the nature of competitive golf. He didn't have the setbacks like Bay Hill. He missed basically every putt inside 10 feet coming down the stretch. You think about the Valspar, the water ball that he had on 16 when he was in command of that tournament. I think this was a very encouraging performance, especially considering he was playing for the 9th time in 11 weeks. He thinks we'll tee it up again in a couple weeks at Wells Fargo, then Colonial, and then the PGA Championship. He has not had many opportunities, Rex, to complete the career Grand Slam ever since that became available to him in summer 2017. But I think this is probably his best chance. I really like the way that his game is trending, and I like where his head's at.
Well, and I always count Harbor Town as one of those bellwether stops for guys, because you have to drive the ball well. And even statistically, that was probably what he did worse. It's so difficult to find fairways at Harbor Town. There is, like, this is where shot length, tee to green is probably, shot length, strokes gained tee to green is probably a better guide, because you can miss the fairway by a yard, and it's probably a better angle at Harbor Town than it would if you were in the middle of the fairway. So I always kind of use this as, okay, where's a player's game going into what's going to be a really important run here? You got the PGA Championship coming up. You got Memorial right around that for a player like Jordan Spieth. You have the Texas events. I think everything he's doing right now is, you're right, this is probably going to be, at least statistically, his best chance to complete the career Grand Slam, which is pretty amazing when you consider that not that long ago we were talking about, would he ever win another major? And now I would probably put him into the top 5 favorites heading into the PGA next month.
And you're not even going to be there for the final round. If Jordan Spieth completes the career Grand Slam,
I'll be there for half the final round. The latest flight out is noon, just so we're clear on that. I have a graduation. The youngest son graduates from high school. So yes, I will be leaving Rochester at noon on Sunday. We'll reconnect Sunday night. It'll be fine.
That's fine. Oak Hill is basically my 5th major. My dad lives about 3 miles from the golf course. Very much looking forward to going home for that major. Could be the last time, right? It could be the last time that Oak Hill hosts a major championship. Very much to be seen. I loved, Rex, the fact, and this is kind of a 2-pronged thing. I love the fact that Harbor Town, which to me is an interesting, tricky layout that really accentuates the best ball strikers. Like, I love the fact that was a designated tournament. This is the strongest field the Heritage has ever had. I'd like to see that moving forward. And I think the tour should prioritize unique venues like this, Pebble, Colonial, Harbor Town, courses that have history, courses that ask different questions of players. Like, I'd love to see that prioritized with this designated event model moving forward. What I didn't love, and that we're going to get into now, was the fact that a designated event was played after a major championship. It put Jon Rahm in a very tricky position where he ultimately decided to honor his commitment, just as Jordan Spieth had done in 2015 when he won the Masters, decided to play in the RBC Heritage as well. And look, kudos to Jon Rahm. Like he said, this is his job. He thought about the kids in the area who want to see the Masters champion. I think he performed admirably, tie for 15th, continuing his good play. Even hopped into the booth. Rex even hopped into the booth Sunday after the final round.
He was so good.
what, he kicked it for like a half hour, just
I
talking
mean,
about golf. Like, I'd love to see that moving forward.
I would too, and I didn't expect it because I mean, you and I have fun. Look, Jon Rahm, when he's properly motivated and I think when he's relaxed, he's a very good interview. However, he can be quite edgy, as you and I have alluded to on this podcast numerous times. And yet, so I was a little bit worried about like this could go poorly really, really quick because you make one sort of offhanded comment, and I've seen it before where it kind of sets him off, and he's not in an enjoyable mood. But you put the big bear in the booth, and he was fantastic. I thought it was like every second I kept waiting for it to go off the rails, and he just got better and better.
Like who would you rather listen to? A tower announcer who's looking at the same monitor that a TV viewer is, or do you want to have Jon Rahm, who literally just got off the golf course, knows these players intimately well and their styles of games and the challenge that's going to be presented on the back nine at Harbour Town? Which one would you rather listen to? And the answer is obvious. It's Jon Rahm. Now, this was I think an extenuating circumstance, right? Like he wasn't flying home immediately after the final round. He was flying home on Monday morning, so he did have some time to kill. I think it's going to be a tall ask to have the best players in the world hop into the booth on Sunday afternoon to break it down. But what's stopping them from doing this Thursday through Saturday? Like I think it'd be a home run if my God, Spieth went in there, or Homa, or Will Zalatoris, like these guys who are notoriously good golf talkers, who love the game, who eat, breathe, sleep the game. Like, get those guys in the booth breaking down the action. I think it'd be amazing.
I think this is a better option, and we talked about this last week at the Masters, because as soon as they started doing the walk and talk with Rory, I think both you and I and everyone else in the free world had the same reaction. It was kind of cringy because I don't believe, that you can spook a pitcher who's got a perfect game going in the sixth, whatever it might be. In that particular case, though, I think we all sort of watched Rory walking down the fairway and thought, if this comes apart right now, if his chances at winning this year's Masters and yet another chance has come and gone of winning the career Grand Slam, fair or not, everyone's going to point to that interview and be like, he should have done that. That's a distraction. That's something that he did not need in that particular situation. I think this, where you're right, you get these quote unquote talkers who want to be in the booth, who like the microphone, who have sort of an insight that we don't get any other way. I'd much rather see this than a walk and talk during a round.
I agree. It's the walk and talk has, I think, been really illuminating, and I'm glad that they're kind of pushing the envelope on the broadcast side. It still feels a little bit intrusive to me. Like you would never have an AirPod in a pitcher's ear in like the bottom of the seventh, right? Like, okay, like what are you thinking here? Like it's, I don't know. It just feels a little bit intrusive, and I kind of like athletes doing their thing and then asking them afterward, like what it's like in that moment. It's still a little newish to me.
It is, and intrusive is probably the best way to put it. I will say it seems situational, that if you get the right situation and you get the right player. And my mind immediately goes back to Billy Horschel when he did it at the Honda Classic, and he was playing awful. And I was thinking, there's no way he's going to agree to this. Like
Jimmy Walker literally just bogey, probably blew himself out of the tournament on Saturday. Yeah. Still put the AirPod in the very next hole. I mean, tip of the cap to him, but it's just like it's a tough ask for the players.
But I thought in Billy's case at the Honda Classic, it was very enlightening. Like you got sort of this refreshing idea from these players who are really, really good at golf. That, man, I'm just trying to get this to the house. Like it was something that I'm pretty sure I can relate to. But I'm just, man, I got nothing right now. I'm just trying to get it to the house. I'm trying not to
chicken wire,
whatever it takes. Like I'm going to crawl to the house somehow. Just stick with me, please. I did like that. I did, of course, Max Homa doing it earlier this year was fantastic. Keith Mitchell doing it earlier this year was fantastic. But in those situations where whether if it's on a Sunday and a guy's in contention, or in this particular case with Rory on a Thursday, and that just didn't seem to me situationally the right place to do that.
Yeah, and like I don't want to come across as like anti-innovation. Like I like the fact that the players first and foremost are agreeing to this. This has been something that the PGA Tour has obviously pushed. It's a great way to kind of make this more of an entertainment product. I just think
you want more old man TV, don't you? Give me more old man TV.
There's just no better way to show the personalities of these guys and to kind of highlight just how intelligent they are and how savvy they are as professional golfers and athletes than to have them sit in the booth in a relaxed setting with a headset on and just call golf. Cool. It doesn't need to be half hour. but 10, 15 minutes after they finish the round. And we've seen it happen before where, a player will shoot 64 right at a major championship. They ask to go to the booth, and it's always like a quick no. Like they don't want to get thrown out of their schedule. But I think now with the push from the tour to be kind of more entertainers in equally as much as they are sportsmen, with the PIP bonuses and kind of expanding their profile, like I think it's really good exposure. And hopefully, if the best player in the world, if the best player on the planet is agreeing to do this, then why not for some of the other guys? I'm not sure how we got sidetracked on that tangent, but it went to go with the designated event model being right after a major championship. This was a problem that we could foresee months ago. Kind of the stress and the strain of following up a major championship. It's going to happen again with the Travelers Championship, which is immediately following the U.S. Open. Rory McIlroy opted not to play in the RBC Heritage despite missing the cut at the Masters. He's the only player besides Will Zalatoris, who is now out for the season after microdiscectomy, who has skipped 2 events, which comes with a 25% penalty for his PIP bonus. So of the $12 million he made from finishing second 2022 PIP, he has now forfeited $3 million of that. I would caution in saying that Commissioner Jay Monahan has complete and full discretion on the allocation of those funds. What do you think, Rex? Fair or foul, Rory McIlroy skipping his second event and thus making himself penalized?
Journalistically, I like the way you handled that with the discretion that the commissioner has. I will tell you that it was a $3 million hit that he took. So, the commissioner could step in if he wanted to. That would be a really, really bad look. So anyone is being told that, yes, he's being, and it's not being fined. They're very, very quick to point out that this isn't fine. They're just,
it's a bonus.
It's just a bonus. So, but put it in perspective for Rory McIlroy, and maybe this doesn't apply to anyone else on the PGA Tour. For Rory, it was more acceptable to pay $3 million, essentially a fine, which it wasn't, but $3 million I'm going to give away because I don't feel like going to Hilton Head and playing golf for the week. And I hate doing this because we just don't know. He didn't have to give a reason for the withdrawal. That's sort of the way the tour regulations work. If you're withdrawing before the start of a tournament, you don't have to give a reason. He might have a very good reason. There might be an injury involved or some sort of family issue. We don't know. So I hate speculating like this, but on its surface, the idea that he's going to sort of turn his back on $3 million just because he wants to go home for a week, which I think we both assumed that some players would do that. I didn't assume someone would do it for $3 million. I thought we were talking about $500,000, maybe even $1 million. But for $3 million, I'll go schlep around Hilton Head for the week. And in this particular case, Rory didn't think it was something that he had any interest in. And I guess my only concern going forward, and I do want to talk about the idea of these events, and we love how they're falling on the schedule. And I did love watching Harbour Town getting this field, the best field.
I don't love how they're falling on the schedule. I think there's been too many in the run up to the Masters, and now I don't like the fact that there's two after.
They're not evenly spaced. Again, this goes into whatever next year's schedule is going to look like. It's going to have to be vastly different, or we're going to end up having this conversation. And the problem is if $3 million wasn't enough to motivate Rory to play next year, when there aren't any mandatory minimums and all he's passing on is elevated points and money out of the purse, that's not going to do it either. So you're going to have a hard time if you're the tour looking the RBCs in the face and being like, well, we tried to get them all here, but 3 or 4 of them just didn't want to do it. I don't think that's going to float.
I don't think that's going to float either. It certainly does open a little bit of a gray area where if players are making the calculus, like, if Roy finished second and his penalty is $3 million, let's say I finished 10th and my penalty is going to be $1.5 million. If I'm gassed, if I don't want to go there, like, I think I'll go ahead and skip the event when I can better prepare myself for future ones with a $3.6 million first place check. Like, I already covered my quote unquote penalty for skipping the event. Like, sure, they're going to do that sort of calculus. As the person on this podcast who typically is rife with reckless speculation, I'm actually going to reserve judgment on Rory McIlroy's decision until we hear from him in 2 weeks' time for the Wells Fargo Championship at Quail Hollow. The fact that Rory was willing to accept a $3 million penalty, the fact that we're going to point to his Masters performance and the surprising miscut there, the fact that we know that he is going to get roasted by his peers for being one of the architects of this designated event model, and then being the only player who, to this point, has been penalized for skipping 2 events. Like, there has to be something that Rory McIlroy is dealing with that has not been made public for him to make that decision.
Yeah.
And so God forbid it's a family emergency. You hope it's not an injury at this point in the season. Like, we don't know. And so until we hear from him, and maybe he doesn't have to justify it. Maybe he just maybe shows up at Quail Hall and said, like, nah, I was good. I can take the heat. Yeah. I'm a big boy. Like, I've been working really hard for the PGA Tour to fight back against Liv, and I just didn't want to go there. Like, maybe he's going to say that, and that's fine. God forbid it's something worse than that, and it's personal. But for him to make that decision, I just don't even want to speculate on what his motives are until we hear from him directly in 2 weeks' time.
But I can get why there's a level of interest. Like, journalistically, I think you and I are going to do the right thing in this particular situation. And you do have to wait, because you just don't know the situation. I don't want it to be an injury. I don't want it to be something he's dealing with in his personal life. And you're right. It probably could end up being where he's just going to shrug and I just didn't feel like playing. And that's all well and good. Because as you pointed out, and Jon Rahm's probably a really good example of this, I actually talked to a bunch of players last year in the Bahamas when they were trying to lay out their schedule. And I was amazed how many players, when I asked which designated event were they going to skip, because we knew they got one freebie back then. Most players told me Wells Fargo, including Jon Rahm. So in this particular case, Jon Rahm's already planning on skipping Wells Fargo. So he's probably has no interest in forfeiting however many millions of dollars he would have had to give it up for the PIP. I will say this as far as the schedule goes, and there's going to be fewer designated events next year, not more. And I think for the obvious reasons that we're ending up with this fatigue, where you do have players sort of not playing their best, trying to rethink their schedule. And what we're going to end up with next season, whenever it comes out, and this is going to be the biggest reveal in my mind as a golf nerd of all time, is I don't know. And you and I have done this as an exercise, sat down and tried to pick the pieces together where you end up with this good flow, as they want to call it.
Cadence.
You have cadence, 2 non-designated events and 3 full field events, or vice versa, whatever the case may be. I've sat down and done this numerous times, and man, it's going to look dramatically different if they can pull this off.
Which I think is fine. Like, there's obviously a rhythm to how the PGA Tour schedule is now, where, Hawaii, West Coast swing, Florida swing, and now it's kind of a mishmash before you go to Texas, and then the summer is kind of a hodgepodge as well, which doesn't really matter because it's mostly for guys who are fighting for status. Like, I'm okay with breaking up the rhythm. Like, this was great back in the day when it's in the 70s or 80s on the PGA Tour. Guys aren't flying for the most part privately. Like, it's not that big a deal, and so you'd want to have stops that were close together, right? Like, now guys just hop on air on net jets, or they've got their own jet if you're Rory or Tiger or whatever the case may be. Like, it's not a big deal to have kind of this tweener event after the Masters. Like maybe Zurich, right? Maybe Zurich becomes the post-Masters break. So now you got a teammate, you can relax in New Orleans, and it's great. In the following week, then it's Harbor Town. You're still having the golf course how you'd want it in terms of kind of the agronomy aspect. You would get a big field because it's a designated event. It just kind of breaks up the rhythm and the cadence. So I do think the schedule is going to have to look different out of necessity, and I wouldn't get caught up as much with like the swings that you currently have. Like, they don't all need to be clustered in Southern California or California in general to make the schedule kind of work for the top players.
Well, and I think we did this exercise a couple of years ago, where if you sat down and you just laid out the tour schedule and you wanted to go to every single one of the golf courses, for example, Pebble Beach being the prime example here, February is probably not the best time to go to. If you want to catch Pebble at its absolute best, that February is probably not that best time. And you can go down the schedule and pick this apart piece by piece. If you were to do something like that, it would look vastly different. And I will point out that 2 weeks before the Masters, you had the match play, which was a designated event. And for a handful of players, you
cannot have that tournament there.
Well, and it's not on the schedule anymore, so it's not an issue. I'm just pointing out the logistics of this year. If you made it all the way till Sunday, you'd played a lot of golf. It was 2 weeks before the Masters. You obviously took San Antonio off the Masters, and then you had to turn right back around. there are going to be people who sort of roll their eyes at this idea that, they play 162 baseball games. Like somehow they figure out how to show up day in and day out. It doesn't seem like it's a huge ask. I think what they've come up with for, 18 essentially designated events, that's counting the majors, the playoffs, and everything else. That seems to be a good number. Now, the only thing you need to do with that number now is create that cadence, that flow that we talked about.
I agree, and that's going to be the challenge. I can't wait to see. That is expected. The 2024 schedule is expected to drop sometime this summer, as of the last report. It certainly will be interesting to see how they have all those moving pieces, how they work with the designated events that are no longer mandatory. Are players going to still be enticed by $20-25 million purses? If it didn't work for Rory McIlroy, it didn't work for Jason Day, didn't work for, I think Alex Noren was another player who skipped the RBC heritage. Is that going to be a concern if it's no longer required?
It's a concern if you're RBC, if you're one of these designated events.
And I mean, you're doubling essentially what the typical PGA Tour purse is. That is a lot. And to not have a top player like Rory McIlroy, or to not have, Jon Rahm, as it relates to the Wells Fargo Championship. He's defending next week in Mexico and then taking a little bit of time off before the PGA Championship. Like, that's a little bit of a concern, and that's going to make for an even harder sell for the PGA Tour.
And keep in mind, on a lot of levels, this year is kind of a proof of concept for the PGA Tour, because the elevated purses, which again, as you pointed out, are pretty much double. They're not being paid by, let's say, RBC last week. RBC didn't have to pony up that much more money to match that $20 million purse. The PGA Tour picked up that gap. The idea being that, okay, we're going to prove this year, and then next year everyone's going to have
to prove it with higher ratings. The stars come. Yes. It's going to be more entertaining, which I like. I think you and I are both in agreement. Yeah. They have worked exceedingly well, exceptionally well. I think even beyond what was expected of them. It's very odd that they would do away with that mandatory requirement. Like, knowing how much of an additional burden that's going to be placed on the RBCs or the Wells Fargos of the world to not make sure, to not guarantee that the best players are going to be there. A little bit strange.
It is. And this is in the fabric, sort of the DNA of a professional player. Because that's the one thing that, of everything that's changed over the last year in professional golf, that's the one thing that I can go to any player, be they middle of the pack, be they 125 on the points list, or be they Rory McIlroy, and they will tell you they don't like being told where they have to play. That's the one sort of stopgap that, okay, I'll agree to playing 20 events, but I get to choose which 20 it is. And of course, it's going to be the majors and the playoffs and whatever the case may be. They hate the idea of, okay, these 18 events you have to play, and then whatever on top of that, you can go ahead and add it. I think Jon Rahm gave voice to this last year at Eastlake when he was kind of told, okay, of the 20 events you can't miss, how are you going to work those into your schedule? And you and I both, I think, were standing there. He was probably the most, wait, what? I have to play 20 events? Like, this doesn't work for me. This doesn't work for my schedule. I'm a European. Next year's a Ryder Cup year. I'm going to have to figure out how to piece this all together. That's why it didn't work. You're right. It's going to be very, very dangerous for the PGA Tour, because you're going to end up with a situation where RBC has paid a lot of money and you're missing 2, 3, 4, 5 of the top players. And it's going to be a hard sell going forward if that's going to be the reality.
Speaking of schedules, how about personally, Rex? A, why are you not covering the Zurich Classic like you usually do? And B, what are you looking forward to this week in NOLA?
Well, I am looking forward to the team concept, because I do think it's become one of those really cool stops on the PGA Tour. And I go back to the column that I got ratioed for when I came out of the match play, that I still believe that everybody,
not the first time, won't be the last time.
Won't be the last. I do still believe that everyone who did all the pearl clutching when the match play went away, like, you guys weren't paying attention. This has been a bad tournament at bad venues with bad formats for a very, very long time. This one, though, in New Orleans, I think they've kind of reached a good tipping point. That you're right. You can kind of show up in New Orleans. You can enjoy yourself. You got a partner. I certainly saw it last year. It seems like the one person that didn't enjoy himself last year was Patrick Cantlay. Not to pick on him, but it was fun to watch him and Xander pair together and do those interviews together. I've never actually poked fun of a player during an interview, because that would be unprofessional in my mind. But I could not help myself. I think it must have been like whatever day it was, Saturday last year, and I had spoken with them all since Wednesday going forward, and they Pat and Xander come up together. And I make a mention. I think they had just shot 61 or some nonsense, whatever unbelievable number they had put down. And I'm kind of trying to set the question up that, man, that looks like a lot of fun. Well, Xander, it looks like you're having fun. Pat, I can't tell. And then I just kind of let Xander laugh because it was the only way to sort of break the mood, because Pat didn't laugh. He didn't acknowledge me one way or the other. But I think it's a good event. I wish I was there. I don't know why I'm not there this year. It's just scheduling.
You hate to see it.
Yes.
As you mentioned, Xander Schauffele and Patrick Cantlay are defending. Have some other good teams: Colin Morikawa, Max Homa, Sam Burns, Billy Horschel, Keith Mitchell, Sung J M, Tom Kim, Siwoo Kim. Stay tuned for a Tom Kim TV feature currently in the works right now for live from the PGA Championship. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing it. It breaks up the monotony of 72-hole stroke play events, which dominate the PGA Tour schedule. I would move it around. I would have it as the post Masters debrief, but we'll have to stay tuned to see whether that's actually the case in 2024. Rex, here at home, with the New Orleans theme, for my birthday, I got a seafood boil / turkey fryer from Loco's Cookers. And yes, we are going to attempt to do a crawfish boil on Sunday in honor of the final round of the Zurich Classic. Never done one before. Obviously, have eaten hundreds of pounds of crawfish in my life, but have never done it myself. Do you have any experience in that?
Yeah.
And if so, what advice would you give me?
Oh, I mean, it's not tricky. It's not difficult. It's pretty straightforward. I mean, it's just a huge pot that you start the boil in, and I mean, the only trick is how hot you want it or not hot do you want it. So that's going to be
in terms of spiciness.
Yes. But you kind of have the cheat code. I realized when we did the barbecue during the Players Championship that you have a neighbor that's a professional cook.
My friend Ricky has never done a crawfish boil. He and I will be plumbing the depths of YouTube to make sure that we are well prepared. It does seem like the trickiness is just getting all of the ingredients. Like, you need the boil, you need the seasoning, you have to have it at the right temperature, as you mentioned, and then it just seems like it's scheduled. Like, you throw in the potatoes, you throw in the other veg, you throw in the corn, you throw in the shrimp, you throw in the crawfish, which obviously don't take too long. My wife and I are a little bit of wusses when it comes to heat. One of the biggest mistakes I think places make is throwing a seasoning on the outer shell. And so your fingers are burning, and then when you bite in, like, your lips should not be on fire when you're enjoying crawfish. All of that flavor should be packed inside of the shell and kind of imbued in the crawfish. So we will not be making that mistake. We just don't want it to be flavorless as well, because crawfish on their own are not all that delicious if they don't have a little bit of Cajun spice.
Yeah, they need some kick to them. I will say this: in a perfect world, too, the crawfish need to be alive. Like, I've done it both ways. Yeah, I've done it both ways, and it's the crawfish being alive that's the difference.
Oh yeah, you got to clean them. They are called bud bugs for a reason. Make sure they're properly cleaned.
Clean them.
Give them.
They can be
a
gross.
little bath and then throw them in there. We're also going to do some char grilled oysters, which I know you and I both love, in honor of the final round of the Zurich Classic. Stay tuned for next week's Golf Channel podcast with Rex and Lav. Hopefully a full recap. Hopefully I do not get sidetracked, and hopefully I actually, like Jon Rahm, honor my commitment to doing a seafood boil on Sunday. What do you have planned on the grill this weekend, Rex?
We did on the pit barrel. I did some 3 ribeyes the other day, and they were so good. And I'm going to do it again. I know.
Did you hang them?
No. There's a grate. You can take the hanging bars out, and there's just like a flat grate. That's how I do chicken wings in the pit barrel. Which next time I was thinking about this, it's so easy for me to it's small. I'm bringing it to Augusta next year, so we can, instead of burning down the rental house next year, we're going to use the pit barrel. That seems like a better option.
We did not burn down the rental house. It was just a little bit of a smoke emergency.
It was a bit of a smoke emergency. We apologize for any
would not
smoke
try
damage.
it. Had it just been proper weather conditions outside, could have used the Kamado Joe. It was sitting there all ready for us.
But I do have to say, there's a buddy of mine. He's a professional. He has a junior program in Hawaii. His name is David Havens, and he's gotten into the coffee rub business. Like, he's got a bunch of different coffee rubs for me. Oh, he sent me 3 of them, dude. Hits, all of them hits so good. So I'm gonna do that again because it was so good.
Ooh, that does sound good. The only thing you got to worry about the coffee rub is potentially scorching them if you get the too much of the direct heat that is a little bit of an issue with some of the sugar in there. You'll have to send me some of those snappy chats because that does sound utterly delicious. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of the Golf Channel podcast with Rex and Lav. We'll be back next week with a full recap of a Zurich Classic, recap of what's on the grill as well, and what other happenings occur in the world of golf over the next week. Hope you guys have a good week. We'll talk to you then.
Les ailes, les bons, les relais.